There was a station for all the neighbours going on in my grandfather's house. Now, a station is a function that goes back to the penal laws in Ireland when there were no churches. You'd be the parish priest would come by the house and say the mass for all the neighbours. Now, my grandfather, God rest his soul, lived to be 95 years old and was only sick 1 week in his life, would you believe it? And that was the week he died. Now, my grandfather was only a young man when this happened, but what kept it fresh in his mind, I suppose, was something comical that happened the morning of the stations. Now, the parish priest of the time, we'll say, was a trifle hasty, fairly impatient, and stern of demeanour. Sure, everybody around would be shivering in fear of him. Although to go to his house, you couldn't meet a nicer person. Tommy O was telling me, because Tommy O was over at his house. Tommy needed a letter of freedom, you see. He was marrying some bird from an outside community. Well, he got the letter of freedom, but as things turned out, he would have been a whole lot better off if he didn't. Well, it came the morning of the station, and all the neighbours were in my grandfather's yard. The morning turned out to be a wet morning, but sure, country people don't mind the rain. Sure, they say it never melted anyone. Well, with that, the youngest fella of the old Driscolls tucked his head around the corner and shouted out, "He's coming!" Didn't all the neighbours take off into the kitchen, leaving me grandfather standing there to greet the parish priest on his own? Well, he didn't have long to wait when Father O'Connor came tearing up the road with a roof over his head attached to a walking cane. My grandfather nearly fainted, for that was the first time that anybody had seen an umbrella in that part of the country. And Father John marched his way in towards the kitchen, and sure, when every man inside the kitchen saw Father John coming towards the doorway and darkening the doorway with his colossal size, so that they all crowd to try and hide behind each other in case any awkward questions were directed at them. And sure, by the time they had looked up, hadn't Father John O'Connor the umbrella turned upside down, open on the kitchen floor, the way the rain would run off it, and it would be bone dry by the time he would be leaving. And that is, when the confessions would be heard, the mass would be said, the breakfast would be eaten, and the dues would be paid. Well, the morning rolled on, and all the services were attended to, and by the grace of God was in the house, fair play to him, and Father John O'Connor was in having his breakfast, you see. All the men were in the kitchen at the same time looking at the umbrella as if it was like some kind of a German bomber. They were saying how simple of a design it was, and it's amazing how someone never thought of it before. And how very handy it would be, to prop it over a barrel in your yard. Say, for example, if you had a goose or something in there now hatching. Just then Father John O'Connor came out of the kitchen and says, "Well, men, how's the morning weather looking now?" One kind of quiet voice from the back says, "'Tis clearing, Father." "Good," says he. "'Tis now I'll make me escape. I'll try and get out of here now while the weather's clearing, and I won't be drenched going down the road." Well, thank you and good morning, they all said, and this came with great relief because the bottle couldn't be opened, you see, until the father had left the house. So my grandfather, which was the custom of the time, accompanied Father John down to the end of the road. Well, as they were walking down the road, didn't Father John turn around to me grandfather and say, "Do me a favour, my man, I forgot my umbrella. Do you mind running back to the house, grabbing it and bringing it back to me?" "Well, no problem," my grandfather says, and he took off like a roaring train up the road. Well, as soon as my grandfather got to the kitchen, he grabbed the umbrella by the leg, 'twas open all the time, and towards the door he was heading with it. But by God, to his amazement, the umbrella would not fit through the door. So he turned it around and he tried to push the umbrella through the door, but by God, with the fear of breaking it, the umbrella would not fit through the door. So he turned the umbrella upside down and sideways, and whatever way he could think of, but the umbrella remained inside the door. "I'll take off the door," says me grandfather, and with that, popped the door right off. The umbrella would still not go through the opening. He turned to his neighbours and he took a look, and by God, the pity look on their faces as they looked back at him. Well, says they, if it came in, it must go out. Now, they were all looking at it and they couldn't figure it out. And one fella turns around and says, I wonder if it would be any value if we drove out the two frames, side frames of the door. The two sides of the frame were driven out into the yard, but the umbrella remained inside. Well, there's nothing else for it, says me grandfather. We'll have to knock the wall. Can someone get a sledgehammer? Well, when the sledge arrived, didn't they have at it, tearing into the wall? And didn't Father John below, waiting for his umbrella, hear the racket and turn around and himself head like a train back up to the kitchen. My God, he says, men, what the feck is going on here? Well, now, says me grandfather, Father John, listen, if I got out that cornerstone now of the doorway, we get the old mushroom head of the umbrella out the door for you. Will you move into the kitchen, says Father John. So they all moved into the kitchen, and Father John turned his back to him and he grabbed the umbrella by the leg. 'Twas open all the time, you see. Now, he was a huge man, Father John O'Connor was, so with the rain and everything and his raincoat on him, he was blacking out the doorway, you see, and the lads couldn't see what was going on. But sure in a flash, didn't he have the umbrella down through the door, open again and over his head and marching down the road within a second. Well, all the lads were speechless. They hadn't a feckin' clue what had just happened. Me grandfather looked down and saw the priest disappear down the road. He turned around to the lads and says, I don't care what you say about them. They have the power.